People always want to know how to buy self-storage units. I don't know how everyone else started out, but I can tell you how I started out buying my first storage units. Stay tuned. I'll tell you all about it. I'm going to tell you how I bought my first unit, but before we get there, if you want to hang around towards the end, I'm going to give away a free ebook that's all about how to grow your financial wealth tax deferred, and you're really going to appreciate what it says. Stick around with me. I'm going to tell you how I marketed to buy my first units, my first facilities, how I got by with purchasing those units when I really didn't have any money. And then I'm going to tell you what was the key to my growth. There was a very key thing that I did that was monumental, and I think anyone can understand it once you catch what it is. So stick around. We're going to cover those topics right now. I never planned to get into the storage business. I was in the town of San Antonio, Texas. I was a bartender living paycheck to paycheck. I was trying to dabble in creative real estate investing, but I just hadn't grabbed the concept that you didn't have to have money to do that. I figured if you didn't have money, you had to be bankable. And both of those assumptions were wrong. I moved from the city of San Antonio 45 minutes north to a small town called Canyon Lake, Texas, around Canyon Lake. There is actually no Canyon Lake, Texas. There is a lake called Canyon Lake, and I live around that lake. There, I was hanging out and starting to notice that I could actually afford and could deal in this area, this rural area. I could not deal in the city. Prices were too high. But in the rural areas, prices were cheap, and people would actually seller finance me little lots of land and little mobile homes with land, and I could actually function out in the rural areas. So I moved out there and was living out there, commuting back and forth to my bartending job. And one day I got a call from my realtor. I say my realtor, it was a friend of mine who was a realtor. And he said, I want you to look at this little storage facility project. And we went over and looked at it, and I ended up buying it. Never even thought to buy a storage facility in my life. But when I went there, it made economic sense, and I could afford that place, and so I bought it. The place was so cheap that I could afford to buy it. It was $8,500. It was 15 stalls. It made a certain amount of income per month, and I knew I could increase it. I was able to buy it $8,500 off some credit cards that I had. And those credit cards were 0% interest, and I managed to roll them over into introductory offers so that I had 18 months at 0% interest. And that's how I first got introduced to the storage business. Then I started to latch on to the idea that there might be a lot of other little facilities like this, and so I made plans to move forward. And that's when the marketing plan started. And the marketing plan was very simple. I went to my realtor and said, hey, how many little facilities are there like this around the lake? He says, I don't know, but let me find out. He went and came back with a list of about 75 people. And so I went and designed handwritten letter to these 75 people. And I wrote 75 letters to these people. And then I decided that was too much work, and I got into a handwritten font in a yellow letter kind of thing. And what I did was I wrote this letter to these people. I put them in the envelopes, and I put them in stacks. Here's 75 for this month. Here's 75 letters for 6 months from now. Here's 75 letters for 12 months from now. Here's 75 letters for 18 months from now. And I did it for 7 years out. I made all the letters. I put them in the envelope. I did everything but put stamps on them, because back then we didn't have forever stamps. So what would happen was when the time would come to drop another bundle, I would pick up a bundle out of my closet. I would go to the post office. I'd tell them to put the storage on it and mail it. Today we have forever stamps, so you could actually put stamps on all of these right now. The reason why I did it like that was I was enthusiastic and very engaged to market for these things today. But if I waited 6 months and had to write 75 letters and start from scratch, I would probably never do it, because I'm a little ADD and on to the next thing. And by the time 6 months rolled around, it probably would have left my radar. I knew this was going to be a lucrative business if I could buy enough of them, and they were small enough I could do it. I could buy 15 units, I bought 25 units. I bought 34 units. I bought 26 units. I bought 50 units. These things were small enough I could get my arms around them as a broke bartender with a few credit cards. So while I was enthusiastic, I printed every letter, stuffed every envelope, and bundled them up so that it was so simple in the coming 7 years that every 6 months, all I had to do was pick up a bundle and walk to the post office. And I did. And I bought 14 facilities from those efforts over that 7 years. The first facilities was just 15. It's turned into 1,300 people, 1,300 doors that actually owe me about $100 a month on average. 1,300 times 100 is $130,000 a month. Now, I don't get to keep $130,000 because I got property taxes and I got insurance and I got some electrical bills for all these places and I got some maintenance, but I get to keep a ton of it. How many of you could live off $60,000, $70,000 a month? Raise your hand. Now, while your hand's up, why don't you hit that subscribe button, okay? Because we got a lot more to talk about than this. We got a whole year's worth of this to talk about. Everything, 24 years worth of experience, I'm going to try to unload over the next year in conversations just like this. So please subscribe, please hit like, and please share, because I need your help. I'm not doing this for my health. I'm trying to help some people, but try to help me back if you can, sincerely. That's how I got my marketing done. And then we're going to talk about how I was able to do this with little to no money in my pocket. I've already given you some clues. One of the greatest things I ever did was move to rural America, to get out of the city. I was trying to be a real estate investor in the city, and I was very aware of the prices of things and the value of things in the city, and they were high. Or I didn't know they were high, but when I moved out to the rural part of the world, I figured out that the city was high and rural was cheap. The city had a lot of people trying to buy everything around it. The rural didn't have that many people trying to buy anything. Therefore, sellers were more likely to seller finance me just to move their property. So how I was able to buy 14 facilities, being a paycheck to paycheck bartender, was that I asked all of the people that wanted to sell me their units, I asked them to seller finance me. And 100% of them said yes. Now there's a little art to that. I did notice about 60% of the time when I was getting a call to see if I wanted to buy their facility or see if I would come by and talk to them about buying their facility because they'd gotten my letter, it was because one of the spouses had died. Usually the man had died. Now the woman, the wife, the widow, was stuck with this rental property that took so much of her husband's time. And she didn't want anything to do with it. Plus, they were both up in years now, and now he's passed, and all she wanted to do was get free, liquidate, and finish their final years out. That was about 60% of the time. I would ask them, what are you going to do with this money? And they would say, I have to do something to get an income because I'm old and I don't have any income. And that's when I would pitch to them, well, why don't you just sell or finance it to me, and you'll have an income without all the work. And it'll be a true income because I don't miss. And here's my references. Take a look, call these people. I always make my payments to them. And they did, and they would seller finance me. That was very powerful. As the storage facilities got stabilized, as I fixed them, repaired them, got the occupancies up to 90% or better, I went to banks and refinanced these people out. But I have to tell you, I'm a softie. And sometimes, even though I had the right to go to a bank and get a much lower rate with a much longer term and increase my cash flow, I recognized that these older people desperately needed this cash flow. And they were charging me 10, 11%, annual interest. And I could go to the bank and I could have got 5 or 6. But those people got me started in that business. I didn't want to pull that cash flow stream away from them. If I pulled the cash flow stream away from them, I would give them the cash. So it was a fair trade. But the problem was I wasn't sure that these old people would know what to do with the cash to make an income. And I don't know where the hell they were going to make 10%. And in worst case, their kids would get a hold of it or something would happen and the money would evaporate, or they'd make a bad investment. It would disappear. And I didn't know how these people were going to make it. So I left a lot of them in place. I left a lot of those 10% notes in place for a long time. But the point that I was getting at was once the properties get stabilized, they're bankable. Banks love storage facilities. They love them, especially when they've got a decent occupancy rate. Just know that you use seller financing, you can get people in the rural areas to seller finance you, and then when they get stabilized, you can go to a bank, cash them out, and get even more cash flow because you're getting a lesser rate and a longer period of time to pay the money back at. So I bought that first facility a long time ago, that 15 units with my credit card for $8,500 was in 1991. So some almost 30 years later, okay, I am to a place where I have 1,300 units. And this is not the business that I concentrated on. I have flipped thousands of houses. The storage business was always in my rearview mirror. It was just when I had extra money, this is where I'd go put it because this was a forever cash play. When I bought storages, it was forever. When I sold a house on a note, the note on its face value could only last 30 years, but notes don't last 30 years. The average note in America lasts about 7.5 to 8 years because you get paid off for some reason. Usually they sell the house to someone else on a new loan, and then you have to get paid off. So this was a forever stream of cash. I was focusing on the house business. One day I looked up, and I never had to work again because this thing had grown to a point. If I'd have focused on that business, Lord only knows how many units I would have. But 1,300 units is still good enough. The key to it was I didn't take any money out of that storage business for the first 12 years. Any dime that I made went back into the storage business, expanding, buying another facility, improving, whatever it was I had to do, putting up fences, electronic gates, lights. I kept improving my storage facility business for the first 12 years. Now, I will say this. We would take one all-inclusive vacation to Mexico once a year out of that bank account. And that was usually started out about $2,000. And then as the years went on, it went to $2,500 and then it was $3,000 a year was all we would take out. For the whole year, one little vacation. The rest of the money rolled in. And I think that's key for any business. Any business you start, you're going to have to roll some money back in until it gets stabilized and gets humming. Once it gets humming, you can start to take a paycheck or do some things. But you've got to let a business have enough money to breathe. And that's the secret. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you hit that like button and that share button. And now it's time for me to deliver on that promise. If you'll go to 1000houses.com and scroll up and down the homepage there's a whole bunch of free stuff. But look for the taxfreefuture.com or the Tax-Free Future ebook and click on that, and you'll be digitally downloaded a book in a few seconds. And I'm going to show you the biggest mistake I made was not putting those storage businesses in a self-directed Roth IRA. If I had done that all those years ago, that fortune that I built with those storages would be worth 2 fortunes.